Koku Ifu and Nicole Freisch are students from Georgia State University. They represented the Public Interest Data Literacy, or PIDLit, Learning Lab and presented work from a grant-funded experiential learning course titled Tackling Food Insecurity. The course connected students with local organizations to apply data skills towards addressing food insecurity in the metro Atlanta area. Check out their work, links are in the description box below.
Hi, my name is Koku Ifu. I am a psychology senior at Georgia State University, minoring in computer science. And then I was also a TA for this learning lab, which is the PIDLit Learning Lab course, Tackling Food Insecurity, which was a 2-semester course, cross-listed between a few different departments, sociology, public health, to not only engage in research, but to empower students to be able to engage in civic and public um, advocacy.
Hi, I'm Cole Freisch. I'm a senior in anthropology and sociology at Georgia State. I was a student for this course. I felt so lucky. Um, I'm here to illustrate the kind of educational experience and practical social impact that PIDLit was able to offer these organizations that we partnered with.
Right. So, getting back to more or less what the course was, split into 2 semesters. First semester was in fall 2023 and was mainly focused on, first and foremost, building relationships with our community partners. Our community partners were MARTA, Wholesome Wave, and also Georgia State Pantry. MARTA is our public transportation. Pantry is a student initiative slash organization that aims to provide students with access to groceries. So what that typically looks like is they have a box of groceries and you're able to pick it up for free as a student. I'll let Nicole speak a little more about Wholesome Wave.
Yes, hi. Wholesome Wave Georgia is a food access organization in Atlanta and Athens. The programs we helped them find data about were the MARTA Market, which is a subsidized produce shop that is in the stations in the lower income areas of Atlanta. And then we have Fresh for Less, which used to double SNAP dollars at farmers markets so people could get more fresh produce to combat nutrition insecurity in particular. And then there was Food for Health, which gives produce tokens to people with diet-related illnesses to alleviate that.
And we did have a few more community partners, but those were the main ones. So yes, of course, first half of the semester, building relationships and understanding community partners that we're working with. We did engage in research, so our research was based around food insecurity.
I can define food insecurity. It's going to be any lack of consistent access to enough nutritious and culturally relevant food to live a healthy lifestyle. And through the lens of food justice, we look at that informed by the structural issues that cause this.
So with that research, there was a portion with getting students acquainted with the IRB guidelines, ethics, things of that nature, and then actively working on the surveys that we would be developing. And ultimately, when it came to data collection, we focused on both online and in-person data collection. With online data collection, that looked like a qualitative survey for GSU students who would be able to take it, give us their more or less feedback and things of that nature. In person was a little more difficult as we did have to go up to people on public transportation. And I don't know how it is in New York, but on Atlanta, if a random student or a young person comes up to you and is like, hey, like, I have this survey for you, but just scan this QR code and I'll give you like a $10 Amazon gift card, that does seem a little sketchy. So that was a little bit of a harder portion of the course, but even with that, we were able to get some pretty good data from both those. The second half of the course looked like cleaning up and prepping that data. So introducing students to that, doing data analysis on that research and presenting the results back to our community partners so that they would be able to honestly understand the issue a little more, but also take some initiative. So with our survey, we have here the survey for the GSU students and the survey for MARTA. With the survey for students, we received about 424 responses, and then with the survey for MARTA, we received about 115 responses. And then from Wholesome Wave, they did also do some focus groups, both in Athens and Augusta. I believe Athens is like 2 hours from the city.
A little less, something like that.
Like a little under 2 hours from the city. Augusta is probably a little farther than that, but just a few focus groups, and we did analyze the data from that. But ultimately, our key findings from this was a staggering almost 60%, 59%, 59.54, but almost 60% of respondents reported a level of food insecurity. And to give some context on the downtown area or on Georgia State's campus specifically, we are a downtown campus, like literally right in the hub of the metro. So for students, there isn't a whole lot of accessibility to grocery stores in the area. Of course, we have a Publix on campus, um, but that is from the dorms. That's about a 40-minute walk. We have shuttles during the week, but they aren't as active on the weekend. You could, of course, take MARTA, but of course, there's that cost of having to pay fare, go maybe up to Midtown to get what you need, and then come back to campus. And then it was interesting because about 41.3% of students did report cost as a big barrier to healthy eating. And even aside from cost, there were a few other factors that Nicole, you're kind of speaking of earlier.
Something that really encourages people to get their nutrition secure and purchase produce is confidence cooking and storing the produce in question. And we'll circle back to that when I share my data from Wholesome Wave.
Of course. And with food insecurity, there are, of course, many important things to consider, such as fatigue, mental health problems, stress. We did receive a lot of personal student open data, so they were kind of like giving like their own kind of 2 cents, and it was a bit of a spectrum. A lot of students said that lack of access to affordable and even just healthy food did lead to issues with classes, where that was being alert, where that was even having the energy to get through classes. So of course, food insecurity was a big focus for this class. But again, one of the biggest takeaways was just being able to empower students um, to be able to do these surveys, get out there, understand the issues that our community is facing, and being able to take action. And with those action, we did have final projects. So I would turn this over to Nicole.
Thanks, Coco. Okay, so in this class, I was able to ground everything I was learning about food justice in class through discussion every week, through real civic action. We got to provide Wholesome Wave with some data that is helping them carry out their mission more effectively. So we had a couple of research questions, or let me start with my literature review. My literature review, this is some of the stuff we learned about nutrition and security in class through really cooperative discussion with the students. And then here's some information about Wholesome Wave, who we had a really wonderful, fruitful partnership with. We got to get some experience in our technological data skills, and they got to get some insight into their own programs, which they were very grateful for. So our first research question was what % of our sample had heard of Fresh for Less before, which, if you remember, is the program that doubles SNAP dollars for farmers markets. And we found here that a big issue was awareness. And we were able to just find this data because I was taught by some wonderful professors who invested their time in empowering humanities students with tech skills. We made this visualization with SPSS, which I'd never used before this class. And yeah, here's just some of the information we found. Our second research question was what % of the survey respondents indicated knowing how what % of survey respondents who indicated knowing how to make healthy meals shopped at MARTA Markets? And here we found that confidence in cooking and storage was a huge determiner of who's going to participate in this program. So we were able to make some recommendations based on this data, which also came from SPSS. And then our next one is just an evaluation of this program to see how well it's alleviating food insecurity, and we did not find a significant correlation. So we're hoping that we're taking our recommendations. And so our fourth research question is, let me circle back. We also learned how to use chi-squared tables, which I had never done before this class. Our next research question was about barriers and obstacles using the Food for Health program. And we were actually quite surprised with this data because we thought it would be heavier on the financial barriers, which is usually what we find, like at GSU, people's main barrier is finances. But once they've participated in the Food for Health program, most people are struggling with the temporary nature of the program. They're not able to build habits. with the time stipulation and the limitations on what they're allowed to buy with their tokens. Um, so yeah, we were able to make a recommendation to this program, and based on that information, which we found via qualitative data coding on NVivo, which is another program that I learned to use. Go PIDLit. Here's a quote that we found from our data. And so here's another evaluation of food for health. We're finding out what kind of behavioral and feeling changes we have from participation. And we found a lot of enthusiasm, though we found some deficits with Wholesome Waves program. This was really hopeful to look at. People were very enthusiastic about their new access to fresh food. This also emphasized learning about techniques with cooking and storage. This is a recurring theme in our data, and which influenced our policy memo later. People were also very excited about varieties. There was one participant who really, really loved the peppers that they got to try. Completely dominated our data set. And this is another one we made out of NVivo. We made 2 word clouds from NVivo. Yeah, you can see how this emphasizes that people were really excited about the program, especially learning to cook. And so, through all this data analysis, we were able to make some recommendations, which Wholesome Wave really graciously accepted. We made a policy memo, which was the first time I've ever done that, and I think it's going to be a really applicable skill going into sociology, so I'm very, very grateful to PIDLit for that. I think that they really carried out their mission in my time in the course. So our recommendations were to advertise Fresh for Less to the public, because we found that half of the people in our survey had never heard of it. And so for Food for Health, our biggest recommendation, because of how dramatic the volume of comments of this sort were, was to remove the one-time enrollment stipulation so people have time to build their habits, and then to increase emphasis on ways to store and prepare fresh fruits and vegetables, our very recurring theme of what do I do with this produce? I don't want to buy it unless I know what to do with it. We even added a supplement to our policy memo. We got to make this retractable banner mock-up that we thought they could put outside the MARTA Market, which is going to increase Wholesome Wave's profile with its logo there and encourage people to buy these kinds of produce, because that's what there is at the MARTA Market. And here we're excited from the literature. And I think it was a really wonderful partnership with our local orgs. This is exactly what Georgia State is trying to get at, giving back to the community, not just letting sociology be theory. Let us get out of our classrooms and feed our neighbors. I'm really proud of our work here.
And then right here, we just have a few quotes from people who did take the class. So there's definitely an emphasis on being able to engage in research, being able to have these experiences with all these different data sets. And honestly, a big takeaway from the class, even for me as a TA, was just seeing students come together and just learn. And ultimately, in terms of PIDLit, or our lab, during learning lab, in relation to PID's overall mission, there is just an emphasis on being able to blend technical learning with civic engagement, being able to engage in your community, get and understand the issues that are going on. Because it's one thing to be a student who's removed from all this and it's just like, okay, this is something that's going on campus, that's cool, but it's another thing to actively engage and working with the community partners that are tackling these issues to be able to have a hand in these surveys, understanding the data and understanding what it means, and even just providing recommendations that will hopefully have an impact in turning that around. So it was great being able to see that, being able to connect students with local organizations, especially MARTA. MARTA has been a big supporter and partner with Georgia State in the past. Like personally, my first year of Georgia State, I did a hackathon with MARTA based around accessibility. So that was really interesting, being able to work with them again. And then even having students like Nicole Gage in hands-on data collection analysis. RDS itself is We're an organization at Georgia State that focuses specifically on student resources. So on our website, we do have a QR code right here. On our website, we have access to a lot of different guides, whether that's Python, SPSS. Me personally, I'm currently working on reworking our Python guide for students, consultations with our professors, or rather our department heads, things like that. But ultimately, a big goal of RDS is sharing knowledge, having students have access to things that will help them in terms of their career, or even just being able to be active as civic-minded students. So yeah, that was our presentation. Thank you to Pitt for having us again. And yeah, any final words, Nicole?
Yes, thank you so much, Pitt, for including us in this. We are so very supportive of your mission. We gotta get humanities-minded people, competent in technology and data skills. Thank you so much for having us.
Also, shout out our department. Shout out Ashley, Oslam, Mandy. Hallie is no longer with us, not because she died, but because she went to work with the CDC. But shout out to our department. They're very big supporters of us. Thank you.
And especially my project partner, Melissa Triner.
But yeah.